Amen. Okay, last week we saw the walls were complete. The walls were finished, right? And there was worship, and there was the Feast of Booths, and all this stuff was going on. And the remnant called for the law, the word. Remember that? And they stood on their feet for hours and listened to the word. And then they did the word, which is super cool. Remember, they all ditched Bible Tools class and went to go do the word, which is awesome. And it says at the end of chapter 9, this beautiful prayer that's very long and very awesome, that the remnant made a firm covenant with the Lord. Remember that? And that was our cliffhanger. This covenant that the remnant made with the Lord. Okay? And then there's this awesome worship concert that happens. Look at chapter 12 of Nehemiah, verse 27. It says, "And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgiving, with singing, with cymbals, with harps, with lyres." There was this celebration and this dedication of the city and themselves to the Lord, and the worship ascended, and it was loud, and it was awesome. These praise and thanksgiving rose from the remnant. And then you read on, and it says that they split the remnant into two separate choirs, right? Everybody went up on the wall, split up in two choirs. One went to the right, one went to the left, and they were worshiping. This would have been wild. They're worshiping on the wall, and they go all the way around until they meet in the middle, right in front of the temple, in this huge, just like worship service, which is awesome. And look at verse 43. It says this: "They offered great sacrifices that day and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and children also rejoiced." And look at this. "The joy of Jerusalem was heard far away." That tells you how loud they were. It was loud, and there were drums, and there were trumpets, and there were electric guitars, and everything that was loud and boisterous, and they had this huge worship service, right? That is so cool. Now, what's really cool about this is that they were playing David's instruments, many of them he designed, and singing out of David's hymnal, and singing some of the Psalms of Ascent, the ones that they sang the first time at the first dedication of the temple. Wouldn't this be cool? To be the remnant back in Jerusalem, back at the temple where the walls are up and worship is going up, and they are so redeemed and so restored back to their original state that they can pull out the same instruments and the same hymnals that David used. That is so cool to me. How cool, how wild would it be if somebody handed you a trumpet and be like, "David played this once." Whoa, here's his hymnal, with all his musical notes in it. That would be wild. And that's what they did. And the loud music was heard far, far away. Now, for 12 years, the remnant is just doing their thing. Okay? They're just doing their thing. The storehouses, it says, are being managed. There's no market going on the Sabbath day. Everyone is marrying who they should marry. And the covenant is intact. For how long? 12 years. It is then that Nehemiah packed his little suitcase and he waved goodbye to Jerusalem. Wait, what? Now, pop quiz, why is Nehemiah leaving? Yes. Remember at the start, remember all his tummy aches, and he was like high anxiety about, I know I'm supposed to go back and build up the defenses. Remember that? So he went into the king, and the king showed him favor. And there was just one contingency, which was, how long are you going to be gone? Remember that? Well, now we're seeing that come back around. Whatever that agreement was seems to be 12, 13, I don't know how long it's been, 12, 13, 14 years. And Nehemiah is like, I have to go back. I promised that I would. I love that. I love that it came full circle. And he did. He went back. Now, how long was he gone?
12 years. We don't know.
We don't know. We don't know how long. He had to have been gone at least a year, because it takes 5 months to get there and 5 months to get back. So he literally would have repacked a sandwich, asked for permission, and got right back on the road. So I'm going to say probably longer than that. But he has to be gone at least a year, probably more. Here's the thing. As soon as Nehemiah's silhouette disappears over the hill, they lose their mind. That is the truth. As soon as he's like, he's gone. And they lose it. It's wild to me. As soon the remnant completely unravels the minute the leader is out of sight. Now remember back on Israel's history. Does this sound familiar? Isn't this what they've been doing for like millennia? So apparently they haven't learned anything. So everything unravels. And here's the thing. So does the covenant. The covenant they made with the Lord completely unravels. And it's a uh-oh, right? It's an uh-oh. So we know that he left and came back. Nehemiah returns to Jerusalem, and things are going so wrong. And 4 times Nehemiah prays the same thing in chapter 13. And it's worth noting, one of the Bible's tools, here's a freebie, here's a pre-thing to know. Repetition is huge. If the Bible repeats something, especially in a chapter, especially in a text, it's important. And 4 times Nehemiah prays essentially the same thing 4 times. If you were going to outline Nehemiah chapter 13, his prayer is the point. And it bookmarks at the end of every event. Okay, so that's important. So being that Nehemiah is a first-hand account, he has a huge disclaimer and wants you, as the reader, to know, undoubtedly, that he was not there when the remnant fell apart. He's like, listen, they are being totally lame. I wasn't even in town, okay? If I was in town, this wouldn't have been happening. And he puts this whole disclaimer. He's like, okay, now listen, I was not anywhere near Jerusalem when all this stuff was going down. That's hilarious to me. That's something I would do. Y'all, okay, listen. I was not there. I didn't have anything to do with this. So he puts this disclaimer in the text, and that's hilarious. Now, pop quiz. The 3 aspects of the covenant were what?
Marriage.
Separation, right? Okay, dedication and contribution. Okay, separation, dedication, contribution. Separation was marrying within God's people, right? Dedication was keeping the Sabbath day holy and sacred. And then contribution was bringing the tithe into the temple, right? Those are the 3 parts of the contract. Let's see how they do. You guys ready? I told you Nehemiah would be better if it just stopped at chapter 12. But it doesn't, right? So look at verse 4. Chapter 13, verse 4. Now, before this, Eliashib the priest. Who? The priest. Everybody say the priest. This is important. who was appointed over the chambers of the house of our God, and who was related to Tobiah. Who's Tobiah? The bad guy. How? What is going on? Somehow the priest is related to Tobiah? When did that happen? Well, the priest's daughter married Tobiah. Now check this out. And Eliashib, just welcoming him into the family, prepared for Tobiah, dude, I cannot with this, a large chamber where they had previously put the grain offering, the frankincense, the vessels, the tithes of grain, the wine and oil which were given by commandments to the Levites and the singers and the gatekeepers and the contributions for the priests. While this was taking place, I was nowhere near this city. Let's just make that very clear. After some time, I asked the king to come back, and when I came back, I was like, what? I discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah, preparing for him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. Now, this is why last week I wanted you to mark where the tithe went. Where did the tithe go? The storehouses, the chambers. Now Tobiah has an apartment in the chambers where the tithe goes. You guys, what part of the contract is this? Contribution, right? Contribution. The enemy is in the storehouses. The enemy took up residence where the offering of the Lord should be. The enemy took up residence where the offering of the Lord should be. He occupied the space where the people would bring in the tithe of all kinds to do the storehouses. And now this dude lives there. Tobiah. We know him. The enemy. Now, so grievous is this that Malachi, whose boots on the ground with the remnant, he lives in Jerusalem, was tapped on the shoulder, much like Zechariah, much like Haggai, much like any other prophet. And the Lord had a word that he was going to give to the remnant. And you can drop the entire book of Malachi in Nehemiah chapter 13. Chronologically, that's where it goes. So the next time you read Malachi, it will make so much sense to you remembering this story. Remembering what they had done with the Lord's tithe. That's the context of what Malachi is saying. And the Lord says, hey, you're robbing me. Well, how have we robbed you? In the tithe. You literally have the enemy sitting in the storehouse. So Malachi was tapped on the shoulder to talk about the tithe. That's why Malachi's tenor is all about tithing, because he was called on the scene to right this wrong that's happening right here in our text in verse 4 through 14. So Nehemiah says in verse 8 that he's hopping mad, and he threw all of his furniture out in the front yard and gave orders that they cleanse, they bleach out the chambers, and then they start to bring in the vessels of the house of God, and all the tithe come right back in. Nehemiah starts picking up furniture and chucking it outside, and then bleaches everything, and everything that's supposed to be there comes back in. I like this guy. he also found out that the Levites, because they don't have any portion and they're not getting their tithe that they are supposed to be funded with, right? That they're supposed to live on, they ended up going back to work, right? So all this stuff was being righted back together. And verse 14 is the tag to the end of this. And the first time we see the prayer, Nehemiah says what? Remember me, O God, concerning this, right? So contract aspect number 1 goes down, which is what? Contribution. And Nehemiah says, remember me, O God, right? So that's our first one. All right, next, verse 15. In those days I saw in Judah people treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in heaps of grain and loading them on donkeys, and their markets are open. People are buying and selling goods on the Sabbath. The people of Judah in Jerusalem itself, it says in verse 16. So I confronted the nobles of Judah and says, what are you doing? Profaning the Sabbath day. Did not your fathers also act like this? And did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on the city? Now you are bringing more wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So he writes that again, and he tells the marketeers, if you try to come in here, I will lay hands on you. That's not prayer. I will literally punch your lights out if you try to come in here. He's hot. Tobias' furniture got chucked. People are getting punched in the face. He's serious about this. Which part of the contract is this? Dedication. Not keeping the Sabbath. You can cross that one out. That one just blew up. And Nehemiah says in verse 22, what's he say? Remember this also in my favor, oh my God. So here it is again. It's tagged at the end of another contract piece. Verse 23. In those days also I saw the Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, Moab. And half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod. Ashdod belonged to what people group? Do you guys remember? It was a chief city of Israel's, one of Israel's oldest enemy, the Philistines. The Philistines. Ashdod is one of the 5 chief cities. So it says half of their children spoke the language of the Philistines, and they could not speak the language of Judah, but only the language of each people. This is so sobering to me, because the parents compromised and are marrying people they should not be. They are yoking themselves to people that they should not yoke to because they are married to the Philistines and the gods that they serve. The children lost the kingdom language. The kids couldn't speak Hebrew. That is so sobering. It reminds me of America. Because the parents are not following the Lord, the kids cannot speak kingdom anymore. And that's what's happening in Israel. The kids cannot speak kingdom. So I confronted them and cursed them and beat them and pulled out their hair. Dude, it's getting better. And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, you shall not give your daughters to your sons, or take their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. He's trying again to get them to recommit. Man, It's rough, right? Look at this verse. I have this underlined like so much. Let this sit in your gut. We are in literally the last 6 verses of the Old Testament. And look at what he says. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of each woman? That's what we call full circle. Did not Solomon do the same thing? Is it not this very sin that took you down in the first place? And he names King Solomon, whose women turned his heart from Jehovah. He lost the kingdom, and the tribes split in half. You're talking night 1. Is this not what Solomon did? This is sobering, you guys. Among the many nations, there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God. And God made him king over all Israel. Nonetheless, foreign women made even him to sin. He was one of the best that we got, Nehemiah says. He was anointed as king, and this sin took him down. Shall we then listen to you and do all this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women? And one of the sons, the son of Eliashib the high priest, Eliashib's other kid, was the son-in-law of Sanballat. You guys! Now the priest is related to Sanballat and Tobiah. No way. You cannot make this stuff up. He has 2 kids. Dude. Right? This is wild. He is related to Sanballat. That's crazy. Therefore, I chased him from me. I love Nehemiah. Number 3, remember them, oh my God, because they have desecrated the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Remember, oh God. What part of the contract is this? Separation. Marrying people of foreign gods. How did they do on their promise that they made to the Lord? How'd they do? It's bad, right? They didn't just fail, kinda. They went all out. Every part of the contract, they went all in. The enemy was in the storehouse where the tithe was. The marketeers were taking over Jerusalem on the Sabbath. And the people were mixing with the foreign nations so much so that the kids cannot speak kingdom anymore. They went all out. You see, it was not good. Ah, humanity. How fickle, how sinful, how unfaithful we are. It's true. Our covenants with the Lord are easily broken. We're not very good at keeping our promises to the Lord. No matter our intentions, no matter how well we want to do, we still mess up. Anybody? No matter how much we've been forgiven, we find ourselves in need of forgiveness again. And again. And again and again and again. The remnant is right back exactly where we started on page 1 of our study. Did not King Solomon sin just like this? Is this not why we were exiled in the first place? Isn't this exactly why Nebuchadnezzar burned the house down? It's because of this sin, the reason of their downfall. But look at the grace of the Lord. Look at verse 30. Thus I cleansed them from everything foreign and established the duties of the priests and Levites, each in his work. And I provided the wood offering at appointed times and for the first fruits. The Lord gave the remnant a brand new start again. Thus I cleansed them of their sin and put them back on their feet and started them over. Oh, doesn't that just oh man, the Lord, right? He's so good to us. These guys made a covenant with the Lord and broke them. All of them. And the Lord, though called out for what they did, is this not what Solomon's issue was? They were cleansed and they were put back on their feet again. And Nehemiah says what? Remember me, oh my God, for good. And he does. Think back for a minute over our entire study. That's a lot of territory. We've been through a lot of things. If you actually write down how much of the story we went through, it's a lot. It's 2 Kings and Jeremiah and some of Daniel and some of Ezekiel. We even picked up Esther along the way. Many of the minor prophets. Ezra, Nehemiah. We've been through a lot of real estate. Think from day one of the Lord's faithfulness and his kindness and his firm yet correct discipline for his kids. His wooings, his warnings, his exhortations, his encouragements. You guys think back like a Rolodex. The kids are like, what? Never mind. Over and over and over, the Lord was faithful to his people, no matter what they were doing. And at times, they truly repented, right? We saw that over and over. They truly repented. They truly did. And many of them were stirred up by the Lord to even do this missionary journey and go back to the homeland and rebuild. All that's genuine. They're still sinners. They still need the Lord's forgiveness and faithfulness over and over and over. Here's the thing. We're at the last verse of the Old Testament, but this is not a surprise to the Lord. He was faithful to them anyway. He chose to redeem them and save them and call them beloved and his own. Same is true for us. We will still fall every day, fail every day. Hopefully that gets less and less. But as Paul found out, the closer you get to the Lord, the worse you are. And that's true. The closer you get to the Lord, you know how wretched you are. It actually gets worse. The Lord chose you and redeemed you and calls you his own, his bride. If you remember nothing else from 7 months of study, remember that. You belong to him. He's not disappointed. Remember me, oh my God, for good. This is the final prayer, the final words, the sign off. If there was going to be a sign off of the Old Testament canon, this is it. How fitting is that? It's a prayer, it's a cry that you could tag at the end of every story, to every character, to every victory, to every defeat, to every book, to every chapter, to every verse. Remember me, O God, for good. And here's the thing. Nehemiah sets his pen down. He closes his journal and says nothing else. That is literally the end of what was written by the Lord. Remember me, O God, for good. And the journal is put down. Now, here's the thing. The Lord does remember. Because although we are faithless, he is faithful still, right? The truth is, our covenants with the Lord are faulty and fragile because we are faulty and fragile, right? That's all we've got in us. All we have to offer him is faulty and fragile. So though we have good intentions and we make promises to the Lord, the odds are we are probably not going to hold up to our end of the covenant. But the covenants that the Lord makes to us are not contingent on our faithfulness. It's contingent on his faithfulness. The covenants the Lord makes to us are solid and sure, and you can say yes and amen because they are found in him, and he is faithful. If he promises, it's going to happen. And that is the truth. It's not based on our performance. There isn't some clause. The covenants are unconditional, based on the condition of him alone. The blueprint drawn before the foundations of the world is still happening. The Messiah promised to Eve in the Garden of Eden is still coming. The covenant made to Adam and Noah and Abraham and Moses were fulfilled perfectly. And the covenant made to David, the Davidic covenant, the Lion of the tribe of Judah did come. And he is coming. He's coming still. And his kingdom is forever. And his scepter will never, ever depart. That's the truth. Turn to Isaiah 9 with me. Put a finger in there. Isaiah chapter 9. Remember me, O God, for good is the last prayer of the Old Testament. And when these pages close, you have to know that history did not stop. Just because the Bible went dark doesn't mean the world did. The remnant still had a tomorrow and a tomorrow and a tomorrow and tomorrow. In Nehemiah's day, they were under Persia. They won't be forever. Something on the world stage is happening, and on the world stage, in the bleak days of kingdoms and kings and wars and oppression and uncertainty, with evil reigning in power, Greece conquers Persia. Alexander the Great conquered the world. Greece conquered Persia, and in that conquering, the remnant's culture and their language and their traditions all changed. Greece changed everything. The Jews found that their law and their language were being warped and manipulated with these philosophies and these governments that they were not used to. And then Rome came on the stage. Rome overthrew Greece. And everything went from bad to worse when Rome took over. And the world truly wearied of all religion and people flexing power in the name of religion. And no one picked up a pen to write. There were no words of prophecy given. The canon lay as it was, completely silent. Remember me, O God, for good. Do you think the remnant ever looked back on Nehemiah's journal and went, huh? Because there's no prophets coming to us. There's no encouragement coming to us. There's no words from the Lord coming to us. And we have been through Persia and through Greece. And now we are stuck with Rome, you see. And things were getting really bad. Rome is in charge. Where's the good? Where's the good? Where's the Lord? Where's the Messiah? The Messiah! Hello? Where is he? That is the thing. Where's the promised Messiah? And that is when historians tell us the Jews begin to cry out. And they begin to look back through their history. And they begin to study the Word. And they began to pull out every prophecy that they could find about the Messiah. And they began to be stirred up in the inside, knowing only the Messiah could save them. Only the Messiah could save them from the oppression of Rome. Only this conquering Messiah that's spoken of in the Old Testament could come and conquer and overthrow governments and make this world right. So they began to cry out for the Mashiach that was promised to them from the beginning of time. It's what they hoped for. It's what they longed for. Somebody to overthrow world governments and give them shalom. Give them peace in Jerusalem. That is why, ladies, they were watching for the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Because of Rome. That's why they were watching for the prophecies of this Messiah that would come and rule and reign in power, the Old Testament tells us. Only the Mashiach could deliver them from the constant oppression of Roman rule. But little did the remnant know, the Lord was silently moving the world chess pieces. One move, one king, one kingdom at a time in his sovereignty so that the prophecies would be fulfilled. Jesus was designed to come into the temperature of the world perfectly set by the divine hand of the Lord. Which meant, ladies, things got worse. Persia to Greece to Rome. But Rome is when Jesus was coming the first time. They had to get there. Through the silence, through the turmoil, through the oppression, and the Messiah was coming, but he was coming at the divine time that he was going to come. He wasn't going to come with Persia. He wasn't going to come with Greece. He was going to come with Rome, you see. And in the 400 years of silence, the world stage was being set for the first coming of Jesus Christ. Now, look at Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2. It says that the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shone. For unto us, verse 6, a child is born. To us the Son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, and on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Who are they watching for? The conquering king who would come and overthrow world powers. But Isaiah says, unto us a child is born. And he was. A child was born. The Messiah would come on a quiet night in Bethlehem, breaking the silence of the word with the cry of a baby. The first Logos, uttered word of God, came in a squall of an infant in the manure to peasant parents in a little city that no one cared about. But he came as a lamb, not the lion, not the first time. That's why they didn't recognize him. He's not doing what we think that he should be doing. Come on, Peter said. Let's call in the legion armies and take these people out. He's a lot like Nehemiah. Let's go. Thwack. Roman ear on the ground. Jesus is like, Peter, they were looking for something different, something more. They were desperate for the Mashiach to come and deliver them from Rome, you see. Now, just as the world stage was perfectly set up in a temperature that no one really wanted, okay, evil, gross, oppressive, all that stuff, it was being set up perfectly that Jesus would come at the divine time. The same is true today. It's true today. The Lord is sovereign over this earth still. Even tonight, as the debates take place right now, the Lord is sovereign. And things may get worse. The temperature of the earth is under the control of the Lord. Make no mistake. And while we are being throttled by the evil and all the uncertainty, it's wild out there, okay? No one knows what is going on. It's wild. The remnant felt the same way. And then Jesus came. The Lord's doing the same thing. The chess pieces of the world are being moved, you see. In his hand, Proverbs says, is the stream of the hearts of the king. Everything, the blueprint is happening perfectly in control. And again, the world stage is being shuffled around today as we speak. Everything and everyone is unsettled all over the world. Nothing makes any sense. It's the same thing it was in the first place, the first time. We're seeing it happen again. Make no mistake, as we go into another wild season, the King is coming. He really is coming. All this turmoil, all this moving around. It must happen for the second coming to happen. He's got it. He's got it under control. He is setting up to rule and reign for good this time. I pray that the remnant story resides in your heart forever. All this time that you've dedicated to the Lord, don't forget it. Don't forget the remnant story. It's a story of belonging to the Lord, sinning against the Lord, consequences of sin, discipline of the Lord, the renewing, the rebuilding, the sanctification, the war, the trumpets, all that stuff. And the Lord is so good to us and so faithful to us, and his covenants are sure. Ours to him, his to us are sure. And the King is coming.